Next is some more research from Lisa Gansky, who is a serial entrepreneur, and she also is the author of one of the most well-known books, which is The Mesh on the sharing economy. And I'm so happy Lisa came just to give her and share with us, give her a presentation on the sharing economy. Lisa? Thank you, Lisa. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Lovely. Hello. So let's see if we can get you. We jumped ahead. Last century was the century of the generals. General Motors, General Dynamics, General Mills, General Electric. It was top-down, mass production, mass distribution. Don't worry, we have it covered. This century is a totally different story. Everyone, or nearly everyone, has a voice, has tools, have friends, and access. It's organized around sharing. Now, sharing isn't new to us. We share things like cafes in Brazil. We share bridges and infrastructure all over the world. And of course, deep conversation, deep thoughtful conversation, a good game of darts, and of course, a few bevies in pubs. For the first time in history, or I should at least say we're in a historical moment in time where we're more connected as a global community than ever before. And then all sharing starts and ends here with the mother of all share platforms. What's facilitating this and why some of this is happening now, there's a number of factors, but one of them is that technology, in particular, 3 flavors of technology are coming together to make this elusive cocktail. One is social networks are allowing us to find each other much more easy. Secondly, physical goods, through a whole alphabet soup of things like RFID, NFC, GPS, are allowing us to find each other and things as they move through time and space. And then, of course, the mobile device is allowing us as well to easily get off of a plane or a train in any city around the world, or almost any city, and pretty much have a remote control to find people and things of interest. So these 3 things together are in many respects taking the friction out of sharing. It's in many instances and for many sorts of services and offers increasingly sexy, convenient, and more compelling, and often cheaper to gain access rather than own. Now, about 2 weeks ago, there was a study done in the UK by a company called Sunrun, which is a solar company, in conjunction with Harris Interactive, a research firm. And they basically interviewed people and found that 52%, this was a US-only study for the moment, but they found that 52% of the people said that in the last 2 years, they had rented, borrowed, or bartered something that they would have historically only owned. And 88% of the people said that they would have given that a go if those sorts of services were more convenient and more accessible to them. So disownership, in many respects, is the new norm. For me, one of the main aspects of the sharing economy is this: value unused is waste. And there's 2 flavors of waste. One is excess capacity. And so we start to see that there are entrepreneurs, and also you'll see corporations, governments, communities coming forward with all sorts of platforms. In this case, we have a company called Makers Row. That's, how many people here have ever either created a new product, a physical product, or wanted to create a prototype? I know that I have over the years. When you go to do that, so just out of curiosity, is anyone here a kind of product designer or closet product designer? If you try to find the places where you can go and build your prototype, they're few and far between, especially if you, for example, win a campaign on Kiss Kiss Bank Bank or Kickstarter, and now you have to go into production on a product. You'll discover that it's quite difficult to find a place to produce it. Well, in this case, these guys created this platform called Maker's Row, and it simply allows you to find excess capacity of factories all over, well, in this case, all over the US, but you know that this trend is a global trend, and also that services just like this exist in many countries and cities around the world. And so in this case, we see something that was brought forward from in the spirit of entrepreneurship. But we also see some of the generals from last century making it over into these new waters and putting their toe into the sharing waters. In this case, General Electric, at the end of last year, announced a kind of experiment. This one is called GE Garages. And the idea is that they own factories that are value unused or sitting around as waste, where there's excess capacity. There's excess capacity of either the physical aspect of gaining access to the factory itself, or intellectual property, materials, capabilities. So they're running things like workshops for students or inviting people who are makers and product designers and developers to come and use their spaces. So we start to see these sorts of things happening from corporations. And then one of the things that you could see as you start to explore sharing economy ideas is that this one, a tools library, is classic value unused. So I'm guessing that I'm not the only one who has things like wrenches and saws and power tools sitting around in the house or in some place stored. And I'm guessing that that exists not only in your homes, but also most likely in the communities where you live. So in many instances, what's happened is communities themselves have created a tools library. They've decided to come together, and whether they form a formal structure like a cooperative, or they just do it in an ad hoc basis, they create a tools library. Also, these sorts of tools libraries have also been created by an entrepreneur that said, hey, this is a cool idea, I want to take it on. But in this case, we have a Swedish hardware company who felt that they wanted to create Toolpool, a tools library, to serve their customers and their local community. And increasingly, we're seeing this, where corporations, local governments, and communities themselves come forward and start to create these ideas, pooling resources or addressing unused value or waste. So essentially, I like to think about this as we're really trading ownership, or the ownership of things, for temporal experiences, especially where we pay only for what we need when we need it. This is a much more compelling model in many instances. Meanwhile, in the UK, there's this expression that I'm quite fond of called meanwhile use. And if you haven't heard of it, it essentially pertains to meanwhile, while you're not using the car park, that particular storefront, or this office, maybe we can do something else with it. And so they have begun to create policies around this whole concept of meanwhile use. Now, one of the great examples of that I'm going to share with you in a second, but you might be wondering, well, where is all this happening? In my view, the center spot for all of this are urban environments around the world. And here's one of the reasons why. In 1900, 10% of the world's populations lived in cities. By 2050, 75 to 80% of the world's populations are expected to live in cities. That's equal to the number of people on the planet today. So the move to urban environments is huge. And when you have more people densely packed, well, it makes sharing sexier. I see cities as platforms. Cities have always invited us to come and to express ourselves, but increasingly cities are platforms, and like platforms, they're open. They begin to create opportunities for different people and different communities to engage. In many ways, it's asking us who owns your city? Now, I know you heard from somebody earlier today about, from the government, I believe, it was here. In many cases, when we think about cities, a lot of people think about local government. But I'm saying that really who owns the city is all of us. And I think if we look at history, we see that we've always come to cities and carved out a niche or made our mark. And we don't get invited to make graffiti, we just do it. So waste, class of waste, or flavor of waste number one, is regarding excess capacity. And I think when you walk outside, if you're from London or when you arrive to your city, and you look around, you can start to identify excess capacity in new and different ways. Also, increasingly, what we used to consider to be a rounding error is now a real opportunity. That things that we thought were, that thing is going to be sitting, the storefront is sitting for a few months. It's not a big deal. Or, this car park is sitting for the weekend. I mean, it always sits for the weekend. It's who would care about that? But increasingly, what we used to consider to be too small to be interesting is now quite interesting to many. A terrific example of that is here in the UK, an organization called 3Space. It's a social organization that works with businesses and government, taking assets, usually real estate assets, and that are available in a temporal way. So, for example, a bank that has extra branches or is going through some kind of repositioning or rethinking, a retail chain that realizes that it now wants to take away some of the shops and move them to another location or close them altogether. Or office spaces that no longer are needed in an area where the company owns the building or has a long-term lease. So these folks take the lease over, essentially, and populate it with really exciting, locally relevant stuff. They're turning excess capacity or waste into big opportunities. And one is happening right now in a big building called the Audit House, which is owned by a fund that is in the process of a redevelopment project, and realized that for at least 6 months, here's an incredible opportunity because they have this big piece of real estate sitting in central London, Blackfriars, an area super expensive. And so what they did was turn it over to 3Space. Now, in the UK, you have this fabulous law that makes it beneficial for corporations to partner in this way, so it's even more compelling. But when I think about when you have a physical space in a community, from my perspective, as kind of a brand geek, I see it as a brand is a voice and a product is a souvenir. When you have a dormant space sitting in the middle of a community, that's not good. The community sees it's sitting around, you're not contributing, and especially if they realize the wasted cost that's going along with that. So in this case, we have the Audit House being converted as an active space for Engineers Without Borders, for a rather wild, progressive, socially ingenious theater group. They open up for social entrepreneurs for Friday drinks. And there's all sorts of things going on, trainings and hackathons going on in this space for the 6 months. You look at it and realize, as in some of the other spaces that they have, that there have been companies and projects and whole communities that have come out of these little cracks, these little 3 months here and 6 months there, that we would have otherwise not even considered to be valuable. So 3Space, I think, is a great example. And then we have, from Buenos Aires, this organization, this application really, that came out of a community of people that realized they want to change what's happening in their cities. And who better to make contributions about really great ideas than the people who live there? So we have here, ¿Tú tienes una idea para tu ciudad? Which is, do you have an idea for your city? And people do. There's hundreds and thousands over a very short period of time of ideas of people coming up with all sorts of ways to turn waste into real opportunity, to make something more beautiful and mostly more functional and valuable. Another one is an application because there's more and more people coming into the cities, and in many cases the governments are getting less money to maintain infrastructure. We're seeing the opportunity also for new kinds of partnerships with us, those of us running around with these, armed with these mobile devices, pretend, that have cameras, GPS, and web. We have applications like see-click-fix, so when I walk around London and I find a broken water main or routes that have popped up a sidewalk, a traffic light that doesn't work, instead of me getting on the phone or having to go down to City Hall and wait in line, which of course none of us probably are going to do, what happens is hundreds of cities around the world are using see-click-fix. You take a photo. The photo knows exactly where you are because of the GPS. You upload it into the application with a couple of comments, and you send it off. And now that fix is in the queue. It makes it extremely cost-effective, and it reduces stress and frustration of those of us that live and work in cities. As I think about cities, one of the people who's most relevant is Jane Jacobs, a Canadian economist who is kind of just, in my view, a brilliant person and observer of the phenomenon of cities over the last 50 or 60 years. And one of the things that she said has to do with the multiplicity of choice, that effectively the main point of cities is that you have this multiplicity of choice. One of the things that we discover in the sharing economy, whether it's crowdsourcing, whether it's living in a city, going to an Airbnb, is that the surprise inside is the serendipity, who you meet, what sort of thing happens when you have this unexpected intersection or friction between two typically unusual sorts of characters. And so cities have become really hotbeds for inviting diversity of ideas and backgrounds. The second kind of waste is this. From ecology, we have this moniker that is waste equals food. That is, the waste from one system becomes food for the next. So that when you have a system in balance, there is no waste. That would be great, and from my perspective, something that you'll see us aspiring to as communities all over the world. A little sign from a place in the Bay Area that I'm fond of. But I would say also that it plays on this whole idea that we're familiar with, which is my trash is someone else's treasure. And the idea that the things that we throw away actually have so much value in them, but we've become, in the West especially, rather sloppy. And so what we throw away is outrageous in many cases. I found out from a friend of mine who's working in a trash mining business that if you have a ton of gold ore and a ton of cell phones, can you guess which one you actually derive more gold from? And so the ton of cell phones becomes a really rich resource, used cell phones. In this case, we have an organization that was created in Canada. It's called Trash Swag. It essentially uses the same sorts of things. It's the internet gets physical once again. We're using the mapping technology that's already kind of our inheritance. So nobody needed to build that. And then on top of that, they're simply saying, I have to throw out a desk or a lamp, or I have this whole bookshelf or whatever, and you put it out on your place in front of your house, and someone takes it. One of the things that I think we also tend to discount is the porosity of communities and organizations. And a guy who was a founder of Sun Microsystems many years ago said that the best people to work on this or that problem don't necessarily work for you. And I'll add, and they probably never will. And so if you're a company or a community or a city or a country, how do you solve that problem? Well, we see things like WIKISPEED, somebody who said, I'm going to solve making a car. The manufacturers, the big manufacturers aren't doing this. That's going to be affordable, a great commuter car, and it's going to cost, and it's going to go 100 miles per gallon. He got 40+ people to join him and created a prototype that competed in the X Prize. Okay, just one declaration and one guy. Here we have a company, Tom's Shoes, who on brand basically reaches out to its community in a design challenge and says, come up with cool designs and we'll have judges, and your designs, if it wins, will be in our product line, and we'll be excited to include you, and so will our customers enjoy seeing what you have to offer. And so this now company with product becomes a platform for designers. This one is quite amazing, in my view, which is essentially that in 1714, the UK started to want to go, people in the UK started to want to go and explore. Those who were into exploration were, of course, going by ship. And as they started to take journeys beyond UK waters, they realized that what was lacking was the longitude, ability to track longitude. So they did what I can figure out to be the first crowdsourcing challenge. And they offered £20,000 to a guy, to everyone, and a guy in Yorkshire won £23,000 over a period of time called John Harrison to solve the problem. So they had their best scientists working on it, but some watchmaker in Yorkshire ended up winning the prize. Again, crowdsourcing and using these ideas is an immensely powerful way to reach out to the global community where we are already connected and get the real value that comes from that. So in closing, a springboard for a couple of ideas. Please start to make little mistakes early. They cost not so much. There's not that many people looking right now, even though you think there are. We're at the very beginning of something really powerful and a major shift. So start now. The French started in 2005, WIKISPEED. Now there's over 536 cities around the world. It's the single most powerful and fastest growing form of personal transportation on the planet. Thanks to the generosity of the French, no one has had to repeat version 1.0. We all stand on the shoulders of each other. So I would just invite you, please start to blow things up gently, experiment, have some fun, and welcome to the sharing economy. Thank you very much. If anybody wants to chat, you can reach me. Thank you.